Hello, friends. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut. I have Fraser Brown, the golf course superintendent at Karrinyup Golf
Like
Country Club, Lake Karrinyup Country Club from Perth, Western Australia, on the show. Welcome, Fraser.
Hi, Micah. Nice to be here.
It is so good to be able to talk with you. I am fascinated with the climate of Perth and the challenges of growing grass there. The temperatures sometimes can get really hot, can't they?
Yeah, definitely. It's not uncommon for us to see high 30s, low 40s Celsius in the summer months. So definitely a challenge with our bentgrass greens.
Yeah, bank. So it's green cooch, which
Yeah,
Americans would know as Bermuda
Bermuda.
grass. So you've got that on tees, fairways, roughs.
Correct. Yep.
The
And then
winter,
bentgrass greens.
and then bank grass greens. All right. Well, we're going to get talking about that, but I'm going to set the stage with this being the ATC double cut. We're going to give a double cut treatment to one of the blog posts, and I'm going to introduce growing bent grass in tropical heat. And that's a post that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I'm going to put the direct link to that in the show notes. Fraser, this one shows what the temperatures are in the summertime in Hiroshima, Japan, where it's also common to have bentgrass greens. And the average temperatures in the middle of summer are going to be up around 30 degrees. So that means what that means in the Japan context is it's going to be a high of about 33 and a low of about 27. There's not a huge difference between morning and night in that location. And then I compared that to Singapore, for example, and this is quite an interesting post for anyone who's dealing with growing bentgrass in hot summers. And I showed for Singapore. In Singapore, the average temperature is rarely above 30. The average temperature is usually about 26, 27, 28, 29 all year round. So it turns out that in Hiroshima, when the average temperature is above 30, which is typical to happen in August, that's actually hotter than Singapore. Now, I looked up the temperatures for Perth, and I saw that there are some days in the summer in Perth where the average temperature is also above 30 degrees.
Mm.
And so that to me says, wow, because I've seen what happens to bentgrass in those kind of temperatures in Japan, in and it's not good. And in Singapore, of course, they don't even try to grow bentgrass in those kind of temperatures. And yet, I've heard that the conditions that you're producing, and I know that the conditions that other golf course superintendents are producing in Perth with bentgrass is pretty good. So, could you talk to me a little bit about the temperatures that you see and then how the grass gets managed?
Yeah, sure. I think first thing I'd like to say is just how dry we are in Perth. I think that's a huge factor. So we do get our extremes. We're high 30s. We can have periods 40 degrees for 2 or 3 days in a row, but we're very dry. So not having the humidity makes a huge difference, I believe.
Can you put a
Um,
number when you say dry? Like do you know those relative humidity numbers off the top of your head?
I'd say we'll be sort of 30s.
That's in the daytime.
Yeah, in the daytime. Correct. Yeah.
So you'll still get dew at night usually.
Yeah, occasionally it'll be hit or miss. So it does cool down a little bit overnight. But yeah, I think that's a huge difference for us managing bentgrass and that sort of heat. For us, it's all about drought management, drought stress.
Okay, uh, that so the grass doesn't just melt away when it's hot, uh,
No,
because it doesn't
no,
have that humidity that's so toxic like you'd have in
yes,
Singapore or in
yeah,
Japan.
definitely, and even in the north of Australia, you go up into Queensland,
Oh,
it's
right, yeah, that's much more humid, much more.
yeah, it's correct, and they're growing warm season greens up there.
Mm-hmm. So
So, sorry.
what type of low temperatures? What would be a typical day when you get the hot weather come in and it's 43 degrees in the
Mm.
afternoon, and then the next
It's
day the
well,
forecast is 42? What type of low would you see that night
it'd
typically?
be mid to high 20s.
Okay. So the soil temperatures are maybe going to be staying up around 30 or
Mm.
above.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's not really ideal for creeping bent grass, but
No.
the biggest problem that you would see would just be making sure that the grass has enough water in the root zone.
Yeah, correct. There's a couple of things we do. I like to see it as windows, and I try to get recovery as early as possible. So I know typically people would apply their irrigation early morning,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I apply it early evening. So as soon as golf comes off the course, I try to get some moisture back in there so we can start the recovery period. So we're lowering the soil temperatures. We're starting to get moisture back into the plant, and that allows as long as possible to recover through the night. So I feel that disease pressure is a lot lower than moisture stress for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to give that up. I'm willing to accept the moisture there. The
I agree with you completely. In my
mm,
younger days, I was all about like don't irrigate before evening.
mm,
Just wait until morning so that
yeah,
supposedly the grass was supposed to be dry overnight and then I'd water it in the morning. And I look at it now and it's just like I'm extending the time in which the grass is suffering from drought stress. It doesn't make any sense. And
correct.
I'm also not allowing the soil to cool down. If I can add
Mm,
some water prior to the evening, that is probably going to cool down the soil a little bit faster, and it takes advantage of having some water in the root zone during the time when the temperatures are a little bit lower.
that's right. I mean, that's exactly how I see it. And I was the same as you. It's only probably been the last 3, 4 years that I've really fell onto that and really believe in it. And
Yeah, well, that's excellent. Now, I think some people listening, if they don't know you already, they may have noticed that it's not a pure Australian accent that they're hearing, and
no,
they may notice a little bit of Scottish there. So
yeah,
so you're coming from a place where you grew up, that's a lot cooler
mm.
than Australia. Tell some people about how you got into this and how you ended up in Australia.
Oh, it's quite an unusual journey, to be honest. As you say, totally different conditions. So I think as most people, I enjoyed golf and I enjoyed being around golf courses. So I got on and I did some summer work at a local golf course, and then decided that was what I wanted to do. So
And
moved on.
that's in the Highlands of
That's up yeah,
Scotland.
right. So way up in the hills, way north in Scotland. So even colder than just normal Scotland. Way up in the hills. So I would see snow outside my window for I don't know 4 or 5 months of the year. Um, so yeah, completely different climate. So then I went off and I studied greenkeeping, and then I joined my local club and stayed there for 6 years, and then decided it was time to start road traveling a little bit and sort of get some new experiences. So I kind of jumped in the deep end and ended up moving to Kiev in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
where they were constructing a championship golf course to an existing site. They already had 18 holes, and they wanted to build another championship 18 with the idea of hosting professional events. So they hired a small team of experienced European guys to go out and help them. So that was an eye opener in terms of culture and just different conditions. You know, Ukraine's a lot warmer than people would think. It definitely gets the cold in winter, but it's hot through summer. So yeah, a lot of new techniques, managing Bentgrass in that sort of heat out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really exciting move, to be honest. It's something I always recommend people is take that gamble. It was in hindsight, I'm not sure how rational that decision was, but great decision.
Yeah, it's like me. I've ended up, on the other side of the world from where I grew up in Oregon, and
Mm,
it's been great for my career,
mm,
to have a chance to work in China, work in Japan, before I went back to grad school, and then end up in Thailand. It's certainly for people that are interested in exploring all the opportunities out there. There's a lot of places you can work in the world, and a lot of
Definitely.
interesting things that you can learn about
Mm.
turfgrass.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a great industry for traveling.
I I'm going to be at the Australian Open in a couple weeks,
Mm.
and I'm going to be at the Australian. And I saw in the Australian Turf Managers Association, is that what it's
Yeah.
called now? That they send out
Yeah.
their The Cut weekly newsletter,
Right.
and I saw
Yeah.
that the edition from last Friday, and it lists some of the staff at the Australian Golf Club and kind of
Mm-hmm.
gives a profile of them. I was reading through that, and there's a lot of people and that are from the UK.
Mm.
There's somebody from Canada. There's of course
Yeah.
people from Australia, from Tasmania, from New Zealand, but looks like a very international greenkeeping crew that I'll be working with. So,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
you eventually made your way down to Western Australia. You were working at a
Yeah, well,
big mining course or something, weren't you?
correct. I had a little spell when I finished it in Kiev. I had a little spell before I moved to Australia, and I went out and I helped Mark Hooker at the out in Bahrain
Oh, that's
just for an
that's
event.
right. Yeah, you were in Bahrain too.
Yeah, I went out there and just volunteered for a month. Just went out to help. It was just after Christmas, and I wasn't ready to move out to Australia quite yet, so I went and did that. So that was another great experience. Yeah, it was great working with those guys out there. And then yeah, I got offered the job in Western Australia. So as you say, it was out. This wasn't Perth. It was 600 kilometers from Perth, out into the desert. It was a mining town with a big gold mine, and they built themselves a championship golf course. So it only just opened 6 months before I got there. So yeah, it was that was definitely an eye opener.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
know, so,
Do you have
yeah,
to? So there must be roads out to there, or do
yeah.
you usually fly in or drive in?
You can fly. It's about a 6 hour drive and a 45-minute flight. So you fly if you can.
Hmm. And was it even hotter there
Yeah,
in the interior?
it's extremely hot, very dry. So they have dry winters there. So we get wet winters in Perth.
Hmm.
They get very dry. So it's very dry up there. Generally, your rainfall will come from the sort of back end of cyclones that will hit the north.
Hmm.
So normally it'll be heavy downpours when you get it, and it's built on a clay soil, so that brings its own problems. So you're crying out for rain all the time, then you get too much rain.
And did they have Bentgrass greens there also, or was
We
that
did.
coach?
They had bentgrass as well.
Wow. So you go
Mm.
so you go from Scotland. You go from being, were you a head greenkeeper in Scotland, or you were just
No, no,
you were
second in
like
charge.
a 2IC, something like
Yeah.
that? So you were an assistant
Mm.
superintendent in Scotland, and then you go to work as a 2IC assistant superintendent in Kiev, right?
Well, no, not quite. We had a small construction team, I suppose it was called. We didn't really have that type of position. We were allocated different areas within the construction to manage ourselves.
Okay. So you're in a management role, but you weren't
Yeah,
the top
correct. Yeah.
person. And then you became a head greenkeeper or golf course superintendent in American
Mm.
terminology at a desert course. Is that Kalgoorlie? Is that
Yeah, correct. Kalgoorlie.
Kalgoorlie at a gold mining town, 600 kilometers inland from Perth in Western Australia in a desert with bent grass, and it gets really hot in the summer. What's the
Yeah.
hottest temperature while you were there?
To be mid to high 40s probably.
Mid to high 40s. So I'm gonna get on Google here and figure out. Would we say like 47 would be about as high?
Yeah, probably.
So
Yeah.
so I'm gonna look up what 47 Celsius is in Fahrenheit, and that's 117 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's hot. Uh,
Mm.
all right. So wow, that was fast. So within like 18 months or 2 years, you'd gone from Scotland, where
Yeah.
I think there, if it was 30 degrees, people would consider it hot,
Yeah.
to now you're.
Yeah. I think the record temperature where I live in Scotland in history might be high 20s, maybe 26, 27.
Uh huh. Wow. And you'd be seeing lows above that for a
Yeah.
lot of the time in the summer. So yeah, that's cool. So you got thrown right into the fire
Mm.
to figure out how to keep.
Yeah.
So first you got to keep the bentgrass alive, I think, and
Correct.
then you worry about managing the playability.
Yeah.
So then you moved over after what 4 or 5 years at Kalgoorlie,
Might have been 6 years in.
6 years there, and then you came to Lake Karrinyup,
Like, yeah.
Karrinyup,
Yep.
which is one of the top courses in Australia.
Yep.
And I had a chance to visit there once
Mm.
in 2017, and
Reactive
at
was.
that
Yeah.
time we were just uh, getting going with the green. Was it just a green renovation project
Yeah,
mostly?
it was greens and greenside bunkers. We were just about to start on the front line when you were over.
Mm-hmm. And you ended up choosing 007 creeping bentgrass, right?
Correct. Yep.
Which
That's right.
you seeded.
Yep. We seeded. Yeah, we seeded them.
Okay. So on the main 18-hole championship golf course, you've got 007 greens. The first ones were planted in 2017,
Drinking,
and the next ones were planted in 2018.
eating.
So you've got 5, 6-year-old grass on those
Yep.
greens.
Yep. That's right.
So I want to talk a little bit now about like how you manage the grass to a high standard. Well, first, how you keep it alive. Second, how you manage it to a high standard in those types of high temperatures. And if you do things like clipping volume, I'm interested in that also. So, yeah, do you do clipping volume? Do you measure how much the grass is growing?
No, not as scientifically as I should. I'm still probably quite old fashioned that in terms of going and looking at the guys as they're cutting the greens and seeing what they got in their catchers rather than measuring it.
Okay, good. Well, there's an opportunity
Mm.
for me to sell you on that. I think it's really useful, especially when we try to do things like fight against Poa annua, because growing the grass as slow as possible, I think, is going to favor bentgrass over Poa. Because I,
Yeah,
I think you would know that too much water might lead to Poa.
definitely.
Too much fertilizer, you would probably think, could lead to Poa. And too much disruption is also going to favor Poa.
Mm.
So I think that
Right.
the clipping volume can be really useful, because if we can minimize the clipping volume, minimize the above ground growth, then that means we're putting as little fertilizer and presumably as little water uh, as possible, which can maybe favor bentgrass over Poa. And secondly, if the grass is growing relatively slowly, then it would seem that we don't have to do as much sand top dressing. We wouldn't have to do as much cultivation. We wouldn't have to do as much disruptive work that could enable Poa. So you can certainly do it the old school way, but I
Mm.
have found it's quite fun actually to look at how much the grass is actually growing, and I think it has the potential to help with some of these things.
I think you're right, and what you're describing there is exactly the programs that we were trying to run, but we're probably doing it without as scientific information as we could get. I'm looking at saying we're not getting a lot of grass off. We look at things like how quickly pitch marks recover to gauge the growth we've got. It's the same old. You're trying to produce enough growth to manage wear and tear, pitch marks, without anything above that.
All right. Well, you must know how much nitrogen you put.
Yeah. So the program, we set out a program at the start of the year. I design a program. I spend a lot of time looking at MLSN. I look at growth potential. I look at my experiences, what we've felt in the last year, and then we make a program. And then generally, I move away from that program once I have it, and I kind of look at what the conditions are. And we're constantly making small changes, but we'll put out around about 180 to 200 kilograms a hectare per year of nitrogen.
Okay. So that is about 3.6 or 3 that's 3.8 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet for our American and Canadian friends.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that seems quite reasonable for Perth for bentgrass, because it it doesn't get cold enough in the winter that the grass really stops growing. Do you ever see frost in the winter, or does it not quite get that
Very
cool?
rarely. We won't see it on greens. We'll see it on some bunker faces and things like that, but that's all.
Okay, so you really don't get cold enough to see frost on bent grass greens, and
No.
in the winter, what would your growth rate be like as in terms of, in terms of how often you would have to mow greens in the winter?
We mow greens every day, even through winter. We do it as a presentation. It's something that the members expect. We've got a busy members club, and we've got members who play on a Monday, only on a Monday. So they expect to get the greens cut when they come. So we cut greens every single day.
Can't you just roll the greens?
Potentially. We cut and roll. So we cut every day and we roll a couple times a week or 3 times a week.
Okay. And in the summertime when it's when you have all that heat stress going on, are you mowing every day also?
We are. Yep, we are. I'm also a big believer in consistency. I feel that even in the stressful periods, I feel if we can put some practice in place and consistently mow, I feel that we get more consistent results. I feel like missing a day and then mowing a day kind of gives us different results. So I used to employ that in Kalgoorlie, a previous job, but it was that little bit more extreme in terms of temperature and the dryness and the water quality and all those things. So at Lake Karrinyup, there's an expectation every day, whether it's 40 degrees, the members expect good greens. So
So
that's one of my sort of non-negotiables. We mow every day.
so you're mowing 365 days a year basically?
We have a day off on Christmas.
Okay, 364 days a year.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Do you keep the mowing height consistent all through the year, or do you adjust that?
No, we keep it consistent.
And what so about
Two,
what is that?
2.75 millimeters.
2.75.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is a bit less than an eighth of an inch for our American and Canadian friends. So yeah, that and and at 2.75 through the year, there's not a lot of space for sand. How often are
No,
you sand top dressing on greens that are
it's
cut that short?
probably not quite as much as I'd like to. With the way our seasons are, the spring and autumn are our prime growing seasons. They're the times that I'd love to be putting more sand out. Unfortunately, it's prime also for golf through those periods. So we end up with a lot of club events on through there, which restricts when I can get on and do that. So definitely not putting out as much as I'd like. I would say we're probably maybe 15 applications a year, just light dusting.
Okay. Do you have a total amount on that sand?
No, it's not something I've measured, to be honest.
Okay. So 15 about 15 top dressings. Yeah. So you've got the perfect growing weather. It looks like you're just coming into that kind of temperature right now.
Right.
And I was looking, the growth potential looks like it peaks in late November and early
Mm-hmm.
December, and then it gets too hot, way too
Yeah.
hot, and the growth potential drops down. But this is a question I
Yes.
wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as the growth potential drops down, because the temperatures are so hot, it doesn't mean the growth actually stops, does it? Doesn't the grass keeps growing fast
It does.
even though it's hot,
Yeah.
right?
Correct. Yeah, and I feel like the periods in spring autumn where we do reach the peak, that's where we manage. It's almost we reduce our inputs at that stage, and use primo. So we're trying to. It's almost too much growth at that stage when it's. So we're trying to rein that back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the greens perform best when they're not growing to potential through those periods. So then we try to encourage a little bit more through those warmer months.
Okay. And the so the grass must grow a lot of roots in the spring and in the
Yeah,
autumn. And do you notice the roots shrinking
definitely. Yeah.
in the summer?
Yeah, you do definitely. I mean, those sort of heats, it's just a case of getting the grass getting your turf to a healthy position where it will handle the summer. So you come into summer, it is what it is. You've done the work, then it's managing it, damage limitation almost in some situations.
Yeah, it's trying to keep it alive and hoping the summer isn't too long. And
Correct.
that's what I talk about in that blog post that I showed earlier, the one about growing bentgrass in tropical heat, is I feel like you have to take advantage of the times of the year when the
Mm.
temperatures are good for the grass to grow, because the grass is slowly dying when the temperatures are so hot. And of course, you
Yeah.
can have bentgrass greens, you could have good bentgrass greens through some periods of heat, but you can't have it in Singapore. Even though Singapore,
Mm.
the hottest temperatures in Singapore are cooler than what you see.
Yeah.
And the reason is just the duration of it. Singapore has that supra optimal temperature day after day after day.
Mm.
And what
Yeah.
happens is bentgrass will die. And what you're seeing, and anybody who's growing bentgrass or cool season grass in these high temperatures, if it goes on for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months or maybe even 4 months, if you've got a good strong plant at the start of that period, you can survive it. But if you look,
Yeah.
but could you do that? Could you manage that for 5, 6, seven
Yeah.
months? I don't
I
think
think
so.
you'd be pushing it. No, I think you'd be pushing your luck at that stage.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with what you've said there. It's a case of getting yourself in that strong position coming into the summer months, and then you just hope that it's not too hot and it doesn't last for too long. But it's outside your control.
Yeah. I talk to people about the growth potential and the way that curve goes. And some people say, they can't wrap their head around fertilizing the grass at the time of the year when it's already having the potential to grow well.
Mm.
They just think they just want to make it grow slower at that time of year. And I can understand that. But if you try to make the grass grow too slowly, if you restrict its growth too much at the times of the year at the only times of the year when it really has the potential to store carbohydrates and grow roots and stuff, if you restrict the growth too much at those times of year, then you end up going into the summer with a weaker plant than you otherwise would have, with less of a root system, with less carbohydrates stored than you otherwise would have. And that to me is a little bit risky. So
Mm.
that's why I think, yeah, I definitely don't want the grass growing too much. And that's why I think my overall rate of nitrogen is important to consider. But I
Yeah.
still want to feed it a little bit at the times when the temperatures are perfect.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. In our climate in Perth, we have two challenging seasons, being summer and winter, and two great seasons, spring and autumn. And we need spring and autumn to get the health back in the plant before it gets into the next challenging season. So for us, winter's as hard, if not harder, than summer.
And is that hard because you've got a lot of traffic, but
Yeah,
the grass isn't able to grow as fast as you might need it to?
correct. Yeah, so we're very consistent in terms of rounds of golf, so actual traffic on the course, but we have our golf season through the winter months here. So the expectation's high. So our club championships and the major club events are all through the cooler months. So the expectation's high. The growth potential drops way down. So we're not seeing recovery. Still the same amount of traffic. We get shade, and also in Perth, we get, I'll say, 70% of our annual rainfall through like a 16-week period. So the greens are wet. The greens potentially can be wet. So
And yeah, so the greens could be wet. The temperatures are going to be like an average of like 10, 12, 14, something like
yeah,
that. So your growth potential is going to be 50% or below
mm,
generally in the winter.
yeah,
And the grass is green, it's growing, it's getting cut every day, but it's not recovering as quickly as it might
that's right.
otherwise.
And it doesn't play well. And that's where the members get unhappy.
So you must have quite a bit of POA annual pressure if you've got most of your annual rainfall happening in a short period, and you've got
We do.
temperatures that are just ideal for POA.
Mm.
Um, what what type of pressure do you see? And do you have much
We
POA in the
do.
greens right now?
Not a lot, but it's something we've really focused on. It was something right from the start. We discussed, building new greens. What do we want to get out of them? What's the aims? Rather than just building greens and see what it takes us, what's the sort of the KPIs? What do we see as successful greens? And being close to POA free was one of them, which, as you say, is a challenge in our climate. There's no getting away from that. We always expect POA to get into our greens. We'd be the only greens ever built in WA not to get that, I believe so. But we've got some programs in place that help us manage that. So to start off with, new greens, we just went through the processes, keep nice density in there. We're trying not to be too disruptive. Try to make sure there was nowhere for POA to get in there. Everything we were doing was to favour the bentgrass. So trying to keep low fertility where possible, low moisture, everything we could to give the bentgrass the competitive advantage. Over time, we've started to see that phase move out, so POA's starting to get in regardless of that. But I'm really lucky at the club I'm at, and we've got a lot of great members who are willing to give up a lot of their time to help us on the course. So I've actually got a little group who come in every single Monday throughout the year, 52 weeks a year. And they come in Monday morning, and that's some of the guys at the club, captains, presidents, committee members, just other members as well. It's a great group. And they come in there and they actually dab POA. They walk the greens.
Mm-hmm.
They dab POA using POA Cure.
Okay.
So the idea was, instead of blanket spraying it, we just go out there and we just dab it, and they keep on top of it. And they've been doing that for about probably 4 years now. Very effective, but we feel like we've got to the stage that we need to move up a stage. So we're now applying POA Cure as a blanket spray.
Okay.
To 9 greens a year. We're still, I would say, we're under 1%, but it's something that we're aware of. We don't want it. We don't want it to get away from us. The members are extremely happy just now, so let's maintain it right now rather than allowing it to become a problem.
Good. And I suppose you mentioned minimizing disruption. You mentioned 15 top dressings per year. Since you put these new greens in, what type of cultivation in terms of core hollow tine aerification or solid tine aerification or venting or other cultural practices that break the surface, what has been done, and how does that transition to what you're doing now?
It's been a big transition for me, to be honest. So when we started the greens first year, didn't do any cultivation, and with it being new greens, and then we started hollow coring from there, once a year, and then moved into twice a year, and that was fine. The members were really happy with the greens. I was quite happy with the conditions we're producing, but I wanted to know: is there a better way? Was there a way that I could achieve the same results for longer without disrupting the members as well? I started looking at different methods. We would solid tine all through winter, for example, which for me was surface drainage. It was essential. It had to happen. Same as hollow coring in autumn had to happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't survive through those periods. But actually, I became less and less convinced that was the case. And I managed to speak to the club, and they backed me, and we invested in some dry jects.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually replaced our hollow coring with dry jects now.
Okay, wow. So you've got your own dry jet machines.
We do, yeah. We've got 2 of them here.
Wow, nice.
And that's changed. That's made such a difference to our whole philosophy, to be honest. It wasn't just the week that you did the renovation. It was, after a renovation, I would say there's another 3 weeks after that before the greens really got back to good playing conditions. So, you do that twice a year, which we were. There's 8 weeks of the year that I felt the greens weren't good enough. Mm-hmm. Whether they were sandy, they were excessively grown because of the extra fertilizer we're applying. Plus, we would apply fertilizer before the process to allow quick recovery. So, there could be 40 kilos of N per hectare just in that application.
Yeah, which it kind of defeats the purpose if you're doing that to help manage the organic matter, and you produce a lot of growth from that rate of N. So
I started thinking about it, and if I did my calculations, and using the tines that I was using, the spacings, I was affecting, say, 8% of the surface area, yet I was over fertilizing, over watering 92% of the surface. And I started thinking, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense. Is there a way that I could not required to put the same inputs into that 92% and still manage my organic matter to keep them nice and firm? So I started doing a lot of research into different things, and I got in touch with Dryject and worked through some numbers with them. And yeah, I was sold and giving it a go. So I convinced the club, and the club were all for it.
Wow.
So yeah, we're 18 months in. We haven't haul gored in 18 months, coming up 2 years, I suppose. And the members have never been happier. We've great consistency. We actually released an annual report to the members last week. So every year, the office bearers of the club, so the board, write an annual report for the members. So I got 3 mentions in there for the condition of the course, and the Dryject got 4. So
Well, that's great. Wow. It's nice when a decision like that can work out so well. And yeah, that's terrific. And it's nice the club could invest in those. I don't know that
definitely.
I don't know that there's a lot of clubs that have their own machines. Do you
No,
do you have any intention, or have people contacted you about wanting to use the machines? Kind
they
of
certainly have.
contracting it out like Dryject typically is done.
Yeah, they have. The club are a bit reluctant to let the machines out. They're the club's babies, so the club want to keep them. But there has been a lot of interest of guys from over east. So we've actually got people coming to have a look in November when we next do it, end of this month. The local sports arena, the stadium here, they've invested in their own one as well. So there's now 3 in Perth.
Wow. How
So
many
we've
are there
been
in Australia?
3.
Oh wow, that's a big potential market for Dryject. I know
Mm,
it's pretty big in parts of the United States, and it's uh,
yeah.
Canada and in Europe. I know the uh, the contractors in Europe with Dryject. I think they're pretty much booked all
Mm,
through the year because
yeah.
it's people like to put that sand right into the root zone and leave the surface pretty nice, and that
Mm.
machine seems like it can accomplish that pretty well.
Yeah, the other major factor that I saw the club on was that, as I said before, we've got 2 really stressful periods of the year, being summer and winter. Spring and autumn are peak golfing conditions, but also peak growing conditions. So we have to do, for me, we have to do renovations in those periods.
Hmm.
So we were losing those 8 weeks I'm talking about before for hollow coring. That was coming out of prime golf season, those 8 weeks. So now what we've done is we've pulled them back. So we Dryject 3 applications a year, 3 runs a year, 2 in November and 1 in the end of January. So we do it through our summer because the stress that I was trying to avoid was pulling the cores off, top dressing, getting the sand back down the holes, rubbing the sand, rubbing the greens. So we now, because we don't do those processes, we've now pulled that back into the summer months. So the idea is that members from opening day to closing day, there's no major disruption on the greens.
That's nice. And
Mm,
do you eliminate that extra fertilizer that you'd been applying?
right. Yeah.
So,
So we'll, depending on what condition the greens are at coming into that process, like we've actually just put a light granular out today ahead of that work in 2 weeks' time, but nowhere near what we put out previously. And in previous times where the greens have been nice and healthy and growing well, we haven't applied any extra. We just ran as a normal maintenance program straight through. So the members have been really happy with that. The day after the work, the greens look like they've been cored, but they play nice and true, smooth and true. So we blow the greens off, give them a roll, and that's them back in play same day.
that's wonderful. That's cool.
Mm,
Um, do you have kangaroos that live on the property?
we do, yeah. So we've got about, I'd say we've got 200 now. So the numbers have definitely gone up in my time there.
Yeah.
Um,
Do they?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing for the club. They don't do a lot of damage. Some courses, even in our state, have had damage from greens and bunkers and turf surfaces through the kangaroos. We're fortunate we haven't. So for me, I think it's great. If you get some, if you were coming to play golf at Lake Karrinyup,
Yeah.
you'd love to be playing around a Western Australian golf course and seen kangaroos jumping past.
Yeah, I was looking at the pictures of my visit, and half the pictures were ones that I'd snapped of
Yeah,
kangaroos that I saw
yeah.
on the course. And yeah, not just like an isolated one, but like 10 of them in a
Mm.
fairway or something. It's pretty cool. Now, what if they're out in the fairway in the landing zone and I'm on the tee? It would seem
We
that
just
you
we
just
play.
you just fire away.
Yeah, do it. Yeah,
Do
yeah.
they ever get hit with a ball and go scurrying away?
Occasionally. There's not a lot we can do about that though.
Yeah.
Um, so we just it is what it is kind of situation. It's very rare to be honest that we have any sort of injury.
Good. Yeah, that's. I'm glad they don't damage the greens. I know
Yeah.
if I was involved in the renovation project and planting the new seed, I would have been terrified about footprints and
Hmm.
activities from kangaroos on the greens. But
Yeah, definitely. Oh, it's definitely a worry, and we definitely through that process, of course, before the grass is established, yeah, you get footprints every day.
mhm.
Yeah.
I I've got another question that I never really know how to answer. Uh, when it gets really hot, um, you mentioned using growth regulators. I suppose Primo
Yeah.
Trinexapac ethyl is that the main
Yeah.
one that you would use,
Yeah.
and and I can understand using that for growth suppression and when in the spring and autumn. When you have those temperatures where it's 42 degrees and 25 at night, do you find that it works well to continue using growth regulators, or would you typically get off of them?
No, I do. I stay through Primo. I stay on Primo all the way through the summer months. It's only I stop using it through winter, but I use it for the rest of the year. I just find that it keeps it a little bit more sustainable. You know, through that stressful period, I don't want my greens actively growing too much.
Mm-hmm.
So it just keeps it sustainable. You know, keeps it from sort of using excessive energy, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
in leaf growth that I don't really need.
Okay. And so you keep regular rates, and do you put it on a calendar schedule or
Yeah,
growing degree day schedule?
growing degree days.
Okay. So you have to apply every week or so
Right. Yeah.
when the temperatures are hot like that.
Yeah. It is. It's weekly. Yeah.
Okay. And do you use preventative fungicides through the summer?
Not a lot, to be honest. No, we actually don't have a huge fungicide bill here.
Okay.
Um,
And is that because you you're managing the water well, so you don't have to worry about pythium so much,
Correct.
and you've got 007, which is relatively resistant to a lot of diseases compared with older generations of bent.
Correct. So what we felt was that when we put the new greens in, it was a clean slate.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going back to old programs, let's start again and be a little bit more reactive. You know, what with the new grass, new profile, what are we getting, what are we not getting, what's the pressure,
Mm-hmm.
what time of year. So we've decided to be a little bit more reactive rather than proactive on that.
I've got a blog post about that also
Okay.
for anyone who's interested. I'll put a link to that one also, which is not specifically about fungicides, but it's just about being reactive in general, and not thinking of reactive as a bad word, and not thinking of proactive as being the only way to manage. Because I think we have our idea in our mind that proactive is the way to be.
Yeah.
But because the weather changes, if you're proactive, you always end up growing the grass a little bit too fast because you're like putting fertilizer, planting, the sanding, all of these
Yeah.
things that then requires a faster growth rate. And so then you have to do a lot of mowing, a lot of work to produce a good surface, when it may be better, I think, to use our modern technology and just be a little bit reactive to how the grass conditions actually are. I think we can be more efficient that way and maybe produce better conditions.
I think so. I think that sort of hybrid system, like I spoke to you earlier, where I have my programs, and they're there in the back of my head. I know what they are, but I tend to be reactive
Yeah.
in terms of it's on paper, but is that the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Have a look at, and I'll change. I'll constantly change.
Yeah, that's what I recommend too. I write on my blog and I explain in seminars about a lot of ways to plan things. Plan using the growth potential. You can plan how much nitrogen the grass could use on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis through the year. And I can plan what I expect my clipping volume to be all through the year. I could plan how much the grass may grow, how much potassium it could use, all of these things, how much sand top dressing may be required at any particular time of the year. I can predict that, but that's not actually how I manage. I just make that plan and I get started doing that plan, and then I measure the grass response, and then I throw the plan away and
Yeah,
I react to how the grass is actually responding. That's
yeah.
that's how I think of managing.
I
And
think you're right, and I think you need both. I think one without the other doesn't work. I think you can't be totally reactive without a plan, and I don't think you can have a plan and not react.
yeah, yeah, having a plan and not reacting is a guarantee to have very average conditions. Um,
Yeah,
and I've always told people, like, you could use a growth potential type of plan, and we could just make a plan, and I guarantee you'll have mediocre conditions. But that that's not what anybody, not many
no,
people are striving to be mediocre.
correct. Exactly.
Now you've got a 9-hole course or a
Yeah,
shorter course that you call,
yeah.
what is that one? The North course?
North course, correct. Yep, North course.
And that one has older greens, pen A4, right? Or
It's got a mix. It's got Pencross. It's got a G6,
oh,
and
right.
it's got a hybrid green where they're a quadrant where they did A1, A4, G2, and G6
Oh,
as a
wow.
trial before they did the main course.
Cool. So you've got a 1956 era grass, and then you've got
Mm.
some 1990s era grasses, and of course the root zones will be a little bit different too. But I just wondered if you notice a difference in how the 007 performs to how these ones perform, these
Yeah,
other varieties in the heat or at any time of year, really.
it's quite interesting because the Pencross has obviously a lot of flaws in terms of the leaf, the coarseness, the open nature, so you get Poa through there, but it handles heat extremely well. The A's and the G's on our fifth green tends to struggle quite a bit in the heat, more so than the Pencross does. Out on the main course, we obviously maintain them a bit more intensely, but it feels like it's a bit of a hybrid between the two. You get your density and your fine leaf, but we're seeing excellent heat tolerance. It's we've commented on the 007 on the greens we've got in our experience almost feels like it enjoys the heat. It really, you push it right to the edge and it seems to love it. It seems to be when it's happiest right on that edge.
Oh, I'm glad it is working out like that. That is good. Um, and and let's see. So you manage the POA with a bit of POA cure,
Yeah,
and you're dry ejecting. So you're not. Do you verticut at all?
rarely. If I think it's required, I will, but I don't program to do it.
And you're trying to keep the growth low enough that
We don't need
that
it.
you don't need
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been so surprised with what Chris Tridabaugh's been doing. If you've read his Substack newsletter or listened to a couple of his podcasts,
yeah,
you'll see that he's eliminated the in-season top dressing. So he's going like 4 or 5 months without top dressing for the last few summers. And I never thought that was possible. I always thought that within 3, 4, 5 weeks, that you'd end up with puffy surfaces. And I've just been shocked that he can put sand in November and then it's covered in snow all winter, and then there's a bit of
really.
sand on the surface in April, May, or maybe April, and then June, July, August, you've got good growing weather, and yet the grass doesn't get puffy. So I see you're doing the 15 you're doing the 15 dustings per year plus the 3 dry jacks, it would seem that you'd want to do more, but maybe that's also like some I don't know, the old way that we used to think.
Yeah,
Maybe the bent grass doesn't need the sand like we always thought it did.
I think you could be right. Because I haven't done it by design like Chris has. As I said earlier, we've got club events that have restricted when I can dust and when I can't. So we go through that same sort of periods where we don't get sand out. So when I say 15, that could be 5 weeks in a row, a certain time of year, and then 3 months without.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm not always convinced that after 3 months I look at it and think it really needs more sand. It could be one of those things that's still in my head. It's embedded. That's what should happen.
Yeah, I certainly had it embedded in my head, and I've I've been giving seminars about how I recommend doing organic matter management now, and I've looked at some of my old slides. As recently as 2014, I was basically recommending to put as much sand as you can,
Mm,
like like a lot, 250 kilograms per, or sorry, uh, maybe 250 tons per hectare, something like that. Just really large amounts of sand
mm,
that I don't think are necessary anymore. So now I'm recommending like 1/4, 1/3 of what I
yeah,
used to, just as
yeah,
a plan. But of course, you throw the plan away once you get started. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, it's been a surprise for me over the past 10 years to realize that maybe the grass doesn't need quite so much.
Yeah, it feels like we've gone through a whole cycle from, what course maintenance, what greens maintenance used to be, 50, 60 years ago. And as more products become available, we start putting more in, and then we've had to be more aggressive with our cultivation, and then maybe dialing both back
Mm-hmm.
is the answer.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of opportunities for us to continue learning and continuing to try to optimize conditions. How often
Mm.
do you measure the green speed and other assessments of green quality?
We, we take firmness and speed stimp every Friday, but it's an internal. We don't release that to the club or members. It's just for us to see what we've done in the previous week and how it affects the playability. Um, so the firmness is the one that we really focus on. The speed's always the interesting one to have amongst the guys on a Friday, but the firmness is the one that we're really focusing on. It's important for us.
And are you using a Clegg or a True
No,
Firm?
true firm.
Okay,
Yeah,
the one from Spectrum.
correct. Yeah,
And when you do the dry jack, does it make the greens firmer or do they just stay the same?
firmer.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
so uh, and in terms of playability, if I hit a 7 iron from the middle of the fairway, that should stop on the green, right?
yeah.
Like I don't have to be a
And
pro to.
we have times of the year that they get pretty bouncy. Not Richard at Royal Melbourne bouncy, but still pretty bouncy.
So that's, and the members would like it
Yeah,
if
they
it.
do. I think what's in our favour is that the conditions line up for us to do that maybe 4 to 6 weekends a year. I think that's about enough. I don't think we want that every
You
week.
mean when you can get it that dry?
Yeah,
Okay.
when we can get it. So it's about trying to get it that dry where the temperatures haven't got so high yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sustainable to keep it at a low moisture level. Once we get into summer, you just can't run with that level of moisture because they'll be gone by the afternoon.
How big of a maintenance team do you have?
We've got 17 and a half full-time equivalents.
And 17 and a half from, are they from all over the world or mostly
Yeah.
Australian?
Yep. So there's three of us from Scotland. We've got
Wow.
one from England. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We got one from England. We got one from Slovenia. One from Finland. I think the rest Australian.
Cool. Well, yeah, that must be fun to work with people from all over the world, and
Yeah.
yeah, people interested in different sports or different leagues, different
Mm.
teams.
And
You
even just different experiences at different golf courses. Like we talked about earlier about the experiences you gain from going to different countries and working there. We've got that with a number of different people.
Yeah, that's good. Um,
Mm.
about the irrigation management or the soil moisture management, are you using the Pogo or a TDR or anything?
Pogo. So we Pogo.
Okay,
We Pogo.
two of them.
Yeah.
Do you have a couple of them that go out?
Yeah, we get two of them. Yeah.
And so, tell me a typical, like how many staff and what the procedure would be if it's January 15th and you've just had a 38-degree high and a 24-degree low, and the greens have the soil moisture just the way you want it, and tomorrow and let's say you've got the next 3 days are forecasted to be 42 for a high and 26 for a low. So what's going to happen in terms of overhead irrigation or hand watering and the pogos, and how many people are involved?
I mean, generally it'll be 1 to 2 guys. We like to sort of give them the responsibility, the ownership of that. So it'd be my irrigation tech would head that up. So he'd pogo. We'd work out where we're at with the numbers. Through the summer months, we will use the overhead irrigation every night, basically. But it's about trying to keep it so we're watering for the wettest areas, for the highest water volume, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll do a lot of
Yep.
hand water mounds. And you learn the greens. You know what it's like. One of the things that we have in our favour in the Perth summer is it's very consistent. Very consistent weather. So you're able to look at it, as you said, this day you do a pogo, you know where you're at, you hand water, you pretty good idea of what you're going to get in the next 2, 3, 4 days as you keep going. So the consistency is definitely key for us.
And so it's just the irrigation tech and a couple of staff.
Yeah.
So
And
and they'll
yeah.
so you're running the overheads, and then you'll go
So we'll
around
go
and hit
maybe
the
like
dry spots.
70 to 80% of ET. So we had to get off ET. So we'll go 70 to 80%, and then we'll go around and we'll pogo and hand water as required.
And what type of soil water percentage are you trying to keep? What works well at your site?
Start in the peak of summer. I would say 21, 22 is a good number to get us through the day.
And what will
Um,
it drop to on a hot windy day?
8, 9.
So it goes all the way
Yeah,
because and your ETs would be 7, 8.
yeah, we get mid sevens.
That's in millimeters. So
You know,
that's about zero point 0.3 inches. Um, so a substantial amount of ET. So
yeah,
you try to irrigate to 80% of ET.
yeah,
So that's your crop coefficient.
yeah.
Oh, nice. Do you have an on-site weather station, or are you using
We
something
do,
from the
yeah.
government?
We got an on-site weather station. The other thing we try to do is we take every week in summer and we try to split it into two small blocks. So we've got our busiest members' day is a Wednesday and then a Saturday. So we try to peak for those days. So we'll do a recovery. A bit more irrigation probably goes out on a Saturday night. Start the recovery process. Sunday coming into Monday, and then by Tuesday we're trying to turn the dial again and push them for Wednesday. The aim on a perfect run scenario is that we start to see footprints from wilt the last maybe 2 or 3 groups on a Wednesday and a Saturday. If
Yeah,
we get it bang on, that's what we're aiming for.
that that would be perfect. That would be perfect. Um, the let's see. I had something that was on a similar topic. Hmm. I'm drawing a I'm drawing a blank. Well, I forgot what I was going to ask. Um, the the playing conditions that you produce, you don't measure the bobble test, do you? You've heard me talk about the
I have,
bobble test.
yeah, I have. I've done that in the past, but it's not something we do anymore.
I think it's
Probably,
I think
sorry.
it's interesting to do because it looks at the same thing that the golfers see, right?
Mm,
Because it's like just the speed. Of course, they feel that, but what they're also looking at whether the ball bounces or darts offline. And I always
okay.
assumed that simply stimp, measuring the stimp was enough. Um, but then it turned out I was measuring at some courses and I realized it wasn't at those
Yeah.
places because they weren't watching the quality of the roll. But I
Mm.
know that you're looking at the quality of the roll. So
We are. We just don't do it as scientifically, I suppose, as the bobble test. Um, but yeah, what you said there, that's exactly what the mindset was. It's easy to get tied up in the think about it as turf,
mhm,
and I want to go back and think about it's not. It's a putting surface. That's what I'm doing.
yeah,
You know, I'm not growing lawn. I'm managing a putting surface. So it's like you're saying, if that's how the golfers measure it, they decide whether I'm doing a good job or not.
yeah, I
So these are the sort of numbers that we need to look at.
yeah, and I think like because if we're concerned about the greens getting too soft, if they're too soft, then when the ball rolls across it, it's going to hit more little bumps, footprints, or pitch marks, or whatever. Um, and I I kind of like the bobble test. If you are stimping every Friday and recording that for your own use, I I have enjoyed the time series of bobble uh, data uh, to
Mm,
to confirm that the quality of the tracking of the ball is what we're trying to achieve. And if you're doing those 15 top dressing events approximately per year, you can check if that is if the week that you do that, if that improves the roll,
yeah,
or if it deteriorates.
yeah, true. And then you can start to look at your numbers, and if I feel like that's the quantity of sand I need, do I go heavier,
Hmm.
less frequent, or do I need that sand at all?
Yeah.
Start to make those decisions.
Yeah, I'm very anti data. I'm a very slow adopter of a lot of these things. I've been aware of a lot of things that we could measure, but I just said I don't want to spend my time doing that because I always
Mm,
thought there's other things that we could spend our time doing.
yeah,
But the bobble test now and the clipping volume, those are two that I now think are worth the time. And I always encourage people to do it. So I'm glad that you're aware of these things, and maybe you can
yeah,
consider whether maybe next winter you can think about that and say maybe that's something you
yeah.
can add on to your
Maybe that's
plan.
the next step. I'm probably a little bit like what you just said. I'm aware of them, and I probably see value, but I think, oh, there's other things I could be doing.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
maybe this is the next step. Maybe this
Exactly.
next move.
Yeah, I see some people get so into the data, and then I think, man, you're too into the data. You need to just look at the grass and do the
Mm,
work. Um, so yeah, it's interesting to see what the best way and the most efficient way to use these data could be. Because you can certainly do a good job without it, but I think it
mm,
can be a nice tool to have some of these things. I did remember what I was going to ask you.
yes.
Syringing in the hot afternoons for the purposes of cooling the grass down. Um,
I,
that
I rarely do it.
you rarely do it.
Rarely do it.
Under what conditions would you think it's necessary?
I suppose, as we discussed earlier about that window, where we start to recover. So I generally will irrigate after the golf finishes. If I feel like we're struggling to get there, it might be a case where we go out, we do a bit of syringing. But it comes back to if we've done our jobs right, I don't want to be doing that.
So,
I feel like it takes away from the members' experience.
and are you trying to cool the grass down by like putting a mist over it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is it common in Australia to do that? Do you know?
Not hugely. It was something I used to use in Kalgoorlie. Again, it was just that next level of heat. It was just a little bit more extreme. It's just that little bit tougher to keep bentgrass alive out there.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do it quite frequently in Karrinyup, but I feel like we don't need to at this stage. It kind of so we intentionally try not to do it.
And you're
We
trying to
want it.
keep
We
it as
want to get
dry as possible
correct.
around the foliage, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes you can get a little bit too reliant on it, and every time that you think, "Oh, something's it's not quite right," I'll give it a syringe. I'll give it a syringe. Before you know it, you're starting to apply more moisture than what you probably want to as well.
Yeah,
So we try to stay quite strict on that. If it needs to happen, it needs to happen, but it's not something we plan on.
it's something that I used to do a lot when I was younger, and now I think it's not necessary. And so I
Mm.
think if the grass is dry, the best time to apply water is right now. It's not to wait until tomorrow morning. So
Yeah.
if it's 1 p.m., if it's 2 p.m. and it's hot, and but if the grass is dry and needs water, syringing isn't really going to help it. It's not going to solve the
Mm.
problem. You could just
Yeah.
put water, and syringing does cool down the surface for a couple of minutes. But
Yeah.
but if it's going to be back up to the same high temperature 10 minutes after you've done it, then I'm not sure it's it's beneficial to cool down the leaf for only 2 minutes. So I've changed my thinking about syringing.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with me. I swore by it in my last job, and yeah, here I don't feel like it's required. I don't think we get the benefit from it.
Nice. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you learn what works and you observe what works, and then you're able to update the way that you do the work. And
Mm.
I have done much of the same thing. So I guess in the summer there's beaches, there's surfing, there's nice things to do down there.
Yeah.
Are you guys? So you're not. The crew doesn't have to work 14-hour days or anything, or do
No.
some
No.
people?
No. No. So typically, well, we work 30-hour weeks here.
38.
38. Yeah,
Okay.
and then rostered overtime the weekends. So the guys, it's good work-life balance in Australia. That's kind of expected. You wouldn't. There's not many industries in Australia now that's not the typical sort of scenario.
So you're managing bentgrass, and you're managing bentgrass greens where the temperatures sometimes are going to be highs in the 40s, and you're able to have the whole crew go home at 3 p.m.
Yeah, 2 p.m. normally.
2 p.m. And so nobody has to stay behind and check for dry spots. So
No,
that's awesome. And you're not stressing about it either.
no.
You're not going
I,
home and being like, "Oh, I got to go back to the course." And yeah.
yeah, look, I lived on the golf course at Lake Karrinyup for the first 5 years that I was there, and I would every night, and I didn't need to. I knew I didn't need to,
Mm-hmm.
but I would be out every night in summer,
Yeah.
driving around, checking the greens, syringing greens occasionally, and I think it was more about making me feel like I was on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I no longer live on the course, and yeah, I go in on the evenings a lot less now, and we haven't seen any improvement or a negative effect on the greens. It turns out that actually what I was doing made no impact at all. So
Well, that is terrific. I'm glad that you get those kind of results with those greens, and I know you're producing greens that are at a very high standard. So that's good. I hope I can have a chance to visit Perth again sometime and see the turf and kangaroos there, and see you, and see maybe some of the other turf grass in the area. I see.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
things have changed a little bit since you were last year, so it'd be good to
yeah,
have you back.
very good. All right, Fraser. Well, thank you so much. We've talked for even longer than I expected, just talking about bentgrass management, which for me is it's a topic of endless fascination, especially when you get into these places where, I've never managed bentgrass for play in that kind of condition. I, I, I actually got into turfgrass science. I decided that I wanted to be I decided I wanted to get a PhD and go to graduate school and learn everything I could about turf grass at university. When I was working at Desert Mountain in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the summer of 1995, and we were planting dominant bentgrass.
Yep.
We were planting that from seed in June, July, August in the desert when the temperatures were over 40 every single day, and it was growing and thriving. And I had come from Oregon, which is a much more clement type of climate for cool season grass, and I was just like, wow, I don't understand how this is possible. So
Yeah,
I
this
think
shouldn't
ever
work. Yeah.
since then I've been fascinated with how bent grass can perform in really high heat. When I was a golf course superintendent, that was in Shanghai, which has really high heat in the summer, and also near Tokyo, which has some pretty high temperatures in summer, and of course Shanghai and Japan have a lot of humidity also.
Yeah.
So to see what you're doing, to be aware of what you're doing there in Perth, and to see those temperatures, it's always on my mind. Like how do they grow the grass there? So thank you for answering so many of my questions. I hope this will be interesting to some of the people who listen to the show or who watch the show. And for anybody who's interested, do check out that growing bentgrass in tropical heat for more about that. And that blog post, which I'll put a link to, also has a picture of some of the pencross that I planted in Bangkok. So yeah, you people can see that you could grow bentgrass in Bangkok, but when you cut it, once you trim it, when you mow it, and you take the carbohydrates away, it eventually dies in this kind of heat. Which it's you know that, which is why you keep it from growing too fast.
Yeah, correct.
All right. Well, that's my long-winded way of getting ready for us to say goodbye. So, anything else before we go, Fraser?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered most things there.
All right. Is that excellent article about you, that profile of you that was in the Australian Turf Management magazine?
Yep.
Is that available online? Is that?
I'm not sure. I can look into that. I can send you a link or a copy of it.
I mean, I've got a copy of it which I could post, or we can just direct people if it's available on the website of the ASTMA. Maybe we could send that link. But yeah, I'll see if for anybody who's interested. Fraser's had a very interesting career, and there's an excellent profile of him recently from the what's the magazine called?
It's the ATM, I think it is.
Yeah, Australian Turfgrass Management, something like
Yep.
that. It's the publication of the formerly the Superintendents Association. Now it's the Sports Turf Managers
Right.
Association.
Association. Yeah. Correct.
And anyway, we'll see if we can make that available for people who are interested, because you've got a lot of insight about working around the world. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, for listening. Thanks, Fraser, for joining me on a busy working day. And yeah, hopefully we can learn some more from each other in the future.
Excellent. That'd be great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, everyone. Thank you. I'll be back again soon with another interesting turfgrass topic. And I'll sign off now for ATC from Bangkok. I'm Michael Woods. Bye-bye.